My daughter cornered me in my garden on a Sunday afternoon and told me I needed to sell my cherished Victorian home to fund her dream destination wedding in Santorini. She'd already consulted with real estate agents who assured her the house would fetch enough for the perfect wedding plus a cozy condo for me. I didn't argue. I didn't shed a tear. I simply nodded, called my attorney that evening, and by the end of the week had set in motion a plan that would teach her the difference between entitlement and inheritance. Without access to my supposed real estate windfall, her lavish wedding, plans began to unravel. As for me, my real life began the moment I chose my own dreams over financing hers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined that at 65, after decades of sacrifice and unconditional love, I would find myself defending my right to keep my own home. The Victorian house on Maple Street had been my sanctuary for 30 years, purchased as a neglected fixer-upper when prices in our now trendy neighborhood were still affordable for a public school teacher with a young child. That spring morning had started peacefully enough. I was tending to my garden, a passion I had only fully embraced after retirement 3 years earlier. My hands were deep in the rich soil, planting the heirloom tomato seedlings I had nurtured from seeds, when I heard the distinctive sound of my daughter Amanda's BMW pulling into the driveway. I looked up to see her striding across the lawn in designer heels that sank slightly into the soft grass with each determined step. At 38, Amanda had grown into a strikingly beautiful woman with my auburn hair, but her father's ambitious intensity. She had carved out an impressive career in corporate marketing, moving from one prestigious position to another with calculated precision. "Mom," she called, waving a thick leather portfolio. "I've got incredible news. Is there coffee? We need to talk." I removed my gardening gloves, brushed the soil from my knees, and led her to the wraparound porch where a pitcher of sun tea was steeping. The porch had always been my favorite spot in the house, with its original gingerbread trim that I had painstakingly restored, and the comfortable wicker furniture I had reupholstered myself. "You're glowing," I observed as I poured tea into mason jars filled with ice. "I haven't seen you this excited since your promotion last year." Amanda beamed, extending her left hand with a theatrical flourish. A massive diamond caught the spring. Sunlight, sending prisms dancing across the porch ceiling. "Blake proposed," she announced. "Last night at Le Ciel. He had the chef hide the ring in the chocolate soufflé. It was absolute perfection." I embraced her warmly, genuinely happy for her joy. Blake Hamilton was a successful investment banker she had been dating for nearly 2 years. He seemed like a decent man, if somewhat reserved around me during the handful of times we had met. "That's wonderful news, sweetheart. Have you thought about when you might want to have the wedding?" Amanda settled into the wicker chair opposite mine, her excitement practically vibrating through the weathered porch boards. "That's actually why I'm here," she said, opening the portfolio. "We've already started planning. September 15th. Just 5 months from now. But not just any wedding, Mom. We're doing it in Santorini." She passed me a glossy brochure featuring whitewashed villas cascading down volcanic cliffs, with the azure Mediterranean stretching endlessly beneath them. "Greece?" I asked, surprised by the timeline and location. "That's ambitious for just 5 months away." "Blake has connections," she explained dismissively. "The resort owner is a former client. They've agreed to clear their schedule for our wedding week if we confirm within the next 10 days. "Well, destination weddings can be lovely," I offered, "though they can be challenging for guests to attend on short notice." Amanda waved away my concern. "We're only inviting 75 people, just our closest friends and family. Blake's parents are thrilled. His mother is already coordinating with the wedding planner in Athens." I nodded, trying to match her enthusiasm while calculating the likely cost of such an extravagant affair. My teacher's pension and modest savings were comfortable for my simple lifestyle, but hardly equipped for financing Mediterranean destination weddings. It sounds beautiful, I said carefully. Have you and Blake worked out a budget for this? Amanda's expression shifted subtly, a familiar determination settling into her features, the same look she had worn when arguing for a later curfew as a teenager or negotiating her first car purchase. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss, she said, extracting a spreadsheet from her portfolio. We've calculated everything down to the last detail. The venue, catering for a week of events, flights, and accommodations for the wedding party, photography, flowers. It comes to just under $175,000. I nearly choked on my tea. $175,000. Amanda, that's the average cost for a luxury destination wedding, she interrupted. Blake's parents are contributing a third. Blake. And I can manage another third from our savings, though it will delay our down payment on the house we've been looking at in Brentwood Hills. Which brings me to why I'm here. She reached across and took my hand, her expression softening into the look that had persuaded me to fund everything from horseback riding lessons to her semester abroad in Paris. Mom, this is my only wedding. My one chance to have the perfect day I've dreamed about since I was a little girl, and you always said you wanted to help with my wedding someday. I did, I acknowledged. And I've set aside $15,000 for exactly that purpose. It's been in a special account since you graduated college. Amanda's smile faltered slightly. That's incredibly generous, Mom. But with today's wedding costs, it doesn't go very far. Especially for the caliber of celebration we're planning. She squeezed my hand, her voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. Which is why I've been thinking about a solution that would be perfect for both of us. Something in her tone raised an instinctive caution within me. What kind of solution? Amanda straightened, switching to what I recognized as her professional presentation demeanor. This house, Mom, it's far too large for just you. All these bedrooms going unused, the maintenance requirements, the yard work. It's a lot for someone your age to manage alone. I manage quite well, I replied, an edge creeping into my voice. The garden keeps me active, and I've been systematically renovating each room. The upstairs bathroom was just completed last month. But that's exactly it, she pressed. You're sinking money into a house you don't need anymore. Do you know what properties in this neighborhood are selling for now? Houses half this size with none of your beautiful renovations are going for over $850,000. The conversation's direction became suddenly painfully clear. You want me to sell my home to pay for your wedding, I stated flatly. Not just for the wedding, Amanda corrected quickly. That would be selfish. I'm thinking about your future too. She flipped to another page in her portfolio, printouts of condominium listings in a retirement community 20 miles away. Look at these gorgeous units at Sunset Meadows. Modern, low maintenance, with a community center and pool. You could buy one outright for under $300,000, put money aside for your later years, and still have enough to help with the wedding. It's the perfect solution. I stared at my daughter, momentarily speechless. The casual presumption that I would uproot my life, abandon the home I had lovingly restored over 3 decades, and relocate to a cookie-cutter retirement community, all to finance her 5-day wedding extravaganza in Santorini, was breathtaking in its audacity. I've already spoken with Sandra at Coastal Realty, she continued, oblivious to my stunned silence. She could list the house next week. With the market so hot right now, she expects multiple offers within days, possibly a bidding war. If we accept an all-cash offer, we could close within a month, which aligns perfectly with our deposit deadlines for Santorini. You've discussed selling my house with a real estate agent? I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. Just preliminarily, Amanda assured me. I wanted to have all the information before bringing it to you. Sandra's done a comparative market analysis. She slid another document toward me. She estimates we could get at least $875,000, possibly over $900,000 with the right buyer. Isn't that amazing? I looked down at the paper, then back at my daughter's expectant face. In her mind, this was already decided, a logical reallocation of assets from a mother who clearly had more house than she needed to a daughter whose wedding dreams required substantial funding. Amanda, I said carefully, this is my home. I have no intention of selling it. Her expression flickered between disbelief and frustration. Mom, be reasonable. You're living in the past, maintaining this enormous old house for no reason. It's not financially sensible. Not everything in life is about financial sense, I countered. This house holds 30 years of memories. It's where I raised you, where I'm finally pursuing the projects I put off while working full-time and being a single parent. It's not just property, it's my home. Amanda's professional composure cracked slightly. So you'd rather keep an oversized house with squeaky floors and outdated plumbing than help give your only daughter her dream wedding? After everything you've always said about wanting me to have what you didn't? The guilt arrow was precisely aimed. I had indeed worked tirelessly to give Amanda advantages I never had. Piano lessons instead of school band, private college instead of state university, emotional support instead of the critical parenting I had endured. But somewhere along the way, providing opportunities had apparently transformed in her mind into an unlimited obligation. I'm offering the $15,000 I've saved for your wedding, I said firmly. That's a generous contribution. If you and Blake want a more expensive celebration, perhaps you should consider scaling back your plans or extending your timeline to save more. Scaling back? She repeated incredulously. Do you have any idea how long I've dreamed of this? How hard I've worked? I deserve this wedding, Mom. No one deserves a $175,000 wedding, Amanda, I replied, my patience fraying. That's more than some people make in 3 years. She stood abruptly, gathering her materials with sharp, angry movements. I can't believe you're being so selfish. All these years I thought you supported my happiness. I do support your happiness, I said, rising as well, but not at the cost of my own security and well-being. There's a difference between supporting you and financing extravagant choices. Amanda zipped her portfolio closed with a decisive gesture. Blake's mother offered to cover our portion too, if necessary. She understands the importance of this wedding and what it means for our family's social standing. The implication stung that my refusal to sell my home reflected some failure to appreciate the social significance of her marrying into the Hamilton family. If Blake's family can afford to contribute more, that seems like a reasonable solution, I suggested. That's not the point, she snapped. The point is that you could easily help, but you're choosing not to. You're choosing a house over your daughter. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that beneath this entitled adult was the little girl, who had cried in my arms over skinned knees and broken hearts. I'm choosing my home, my future, over an extravagant expense that would fundamentally alter my life. That's not the same thing as choosing it over you. Amanda shouldered her designer handbag, her jaw set in a stubborn line I recognized all too well. This conversation isn't over, Mom. You have 5 months until the wedding. I hope you'll reconsider what really matters before then. As she stalked back to her car, heels punching small divots in my carefully tended lawn, I remained on the porch, the real estate comparative market analysis still on the table between our abandoned tea glasses. The spring breeze carried the scent of the roses I had planted the previous year, finally blooming in earnest after careful cultivation. Like this house, they had required patience, attention, and love to reach their potential. And like this house, they were not something I was prepared to surrender, not even for the daughter I adored. That evening, after the shock of Amanda's proposal had settled into a dull ache of disappointment, I found myself wandering through the rooms of my home with new awareness. The dining room where we had celebrated every birthday and holiday. The window seat in the living room where I had read countless bedtime stories. The kitchen I had modernized. 5 years ago, fulfilling a 20-year dream of having a proper chef's range and stone countertops. This wasn't just a financial asset to be liquidated for a 5-day celebration. It was the physical embodiment of a life carefully built, a sanctuary earned through years of dedication and hard work. As I settled at my antique desk in the study to pay bills, my eyes fell on the business card tucked into the corner of my desk. Blotter, Harrison Wells, attorney at law. I had consulted him 3 years ago when drafting my will after retirement. Without fully forming a conscious plan, I reached for my phone and dialed his after-hours number. Mr. Wells, it's Judith Morgan. I apologize for calling outside business hours, but I find myself in need of legal advice regarding my property and estate. How soon could we meet? His response was prompt and reassuring. For you, Mrs. Morgan, I could make time tomorrow morning, at 9. Is everything all right? Not entirely, I admitted. But I believe with your help, it will be. As I hung up, a sense of calm resolve replaced the hurt and confusion of the afternoon. Amanda had presented her plan for my house and, by extension, my future. Now it was time to formulate my own. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that had always made me grateful for my garden. But as I prepared for my appointment with Harrison Wells, I found myself seeing my beloved home through Amanda's cold, calculating eyes as a financial asset rather than the heart of my life. The thought brought a heaviness I hadn't expected. Harrison's office occupied the first floor of a converted Victorian not unlike my own, though his had been transformed into a professional space with understated elegance. At precisely $9, his assistant showed me into a comfortable office filled with warm wood and leather, legal volumes lining the walls. Judith, Harrison rose to greet me, his handshake firm despite his 70-plus years. Always a pleasure, though I gather the circumstances aren't ideal. Far from it, I admitted as I settled into the visitor's chair. For the next 20 minutes, I recounted my conversation with Amanda, leaving nothing out. Not her presumption, not my hurt, not my firm refusal. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression impassive save for a slight tightening around his eyes when I mentioned the real estate agent Amanda had already consulted. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, fingertips pressed together. What you're describing, he said carefully, is concerning on several levels, not least the fact that your daughter appears to be planning the liquidation of your primary asset without your consent. She believes she's acting in my best interest, I offered, still instinctively defending her despite everything. Harrison's eyebrow arched skeptically. Does she? Or is she acting in her own best interest while constructing a narrative that allows her to feel justified? He waved away my attempt to respond. Regardless of her intentions, the practical matter remains. Your home is solely in your name, and no one can force you to sell it. I know that, I assured him. I'm not here because I think Amanda can legally compel me to sell. I'm here because I'm concerned about what might happen next. A wise concern, Harrison nodded. People who believe they're entitled to others' assets rarely give up easily. What exactly are you afraid of? I hadn't fully articulated it to myself until that moment. I'm afraid this is just the beginning. That if I refuse to fund this wedding, Amanda will escalate. She's always been determined, and she's recently started suggesting I'm becoming forgetful, less capable than I used to be. Harrison's expression sharpened. Has she discussed your mental acuity with others? She's made comments to my sister about how I seem confused sometimes. And yesterday she mentioned how managing this house must be so much for someone your age. I see. Harrison's tone had grown noticeably cooler. Judith, I've known you for over a decade. You're one of the sharpest clients I have, regardless of age. But I've seen this pattern before. Adult children laying groundwork to challenge a parent's competence when financial disagreements arise. The suggestion sent a chill through me. Surely Amanda wouldn't— I hope not, he interrupted gently. But hope is not a strategy. Let me ask you this. What outcome would you like to see here? I considered the question carefully. I want to keep my home. I want to live here for as long as I'm able. I want to maintain my relationship with my daughter if possible, but not at the cost of my independence or dignity. And what about the wedding? Are you willing to contribute financially at all? The $15,000 I've already set aside, yes. It's a substantial gift that I've planned for. But not at the expense of selling my home or liquidating my retirement savings. Harrison nodded, making notes on a yellow legal pad. Then I suggest a multi-pronged approach to protect your interests. First, we should update your estate planning to reflect your current wishes. Second, we should document your mental competence through a clinical evaluation, not because there's any question, but as a preventative measure. And third, we need to secure your property against any attempts to force a sale. How would we do that? I asked. There are several options, he explained. A life estate, a trust, or even a transfer with conditions. Each has different implications for taxes, control, and future flexibility. He studied me for a moment. But before we dive into legal mechanisms, may I ask a personal question? Of course. What do you envision for your home in the long term, after you no longer need it? The question caught me off guard, but I realized I did have an answer. I've always imagined Amanda would inherit it someday, that she might raise her own family here, or at least appreciate the investment I've made. But now, I trailed off, uncertainty clouding my vision of the future. Now you're not sure if she would honor your attachment to the property? Harrison finished for me. Exactly. If she's this eager to sell it while I'm still alive and well, what would stop her from selling it the moment I'm gone? Harrison nodded thoughtfully. That's why I'm going to suggest something that might initially feel counterintuitive. Instead of focusing solely on keeping Amanda from forcing a sale now, let's consider how to ensure your home's legacy aligns with your values, regardless of what happens between you and your daughter. For the next hour, Harrison outlined various legal structures that could protect both my current interests and my home's future. The option that resonated most deeply was creating a charitable remainder trust with a twist. I would retain lifetime use of the property, but upon my death, the house would be donated to the local historical society with provisions for its preservation and partial use as a community arts space. It's elegant, Harrison explained, because it accomplishes multiple objectives simultaneously. It secures your right to remain in your home for life. It creates a meaningful legacy that honors your restoration work. It generates a significant tax deduction you can use over the next several years. And perhaps most importantly for your immediate situation, it removes any financial incentive for pressuring you to sell. As he explained the details, I felt a weight lifting. Not just the immediate concern about Amanda's wedding demands, but a deeper uncertainty about my home's fate that I hadn't fully acknowledged. How soon could we implement this? I asked. I could have the preliminary documents ready for your review by the end of next week, Harrison replied. In the meantime, I'd suggest scheduling that cognitive assessment with Dr. Miller. Her evaluations are thorough and well respected by the courts, should that ever become relevant. As I left Harrison's office, plans in motion, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had begun as a defensive reaction to Amanda's demands was transforming into something more meaningful, a deliberate choice about my legacy that extended beyond family inheritance. My phone buzzed with a text as I reached my car. Amanda. Just touched base with Sandra at Coastal Realty. She can come by tomorrow to start the listing process. What time works for you? The presumption was breathtaking. I replied simply, I won't be meeting with any real estate agents. As I told you yesterday, I'm not selling my home. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, Mom, don't be difficult. This is happening. The wedding deposits are due next week. I'm coming over tonight with Blake to discuss the timeline. I didn't respond, tucking my phone away as I drove home. The confrontation was coming sooner than I'd expected, but I felt oddly prepared. Harrison's counsel had given me not just legal strategies, but emotional clarity. That afternoon, I made 2 important calls. The first was to Dr. Miller's office, where I scheduled a comprehensive cognitive assessment for the following week. The second was to my sister Margaret, who lived an hour away and had always been my most steadfast ally. "Amanda wants you to do what?" Margaret's indignation crackled through the phone when I explained the situation. "Sell my house to fund her destination wedding," I repeated. "And she's bringing Blake over tonight to discuss the timeline." I don't even have words," Margaret sputtered. "Do you want me to come over? Be there when they arrive?" The offer was tempting, but I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. "No, I need to handle this myself, but I wanted you to know what's happening. Amanda mentioned she's been talking to you about me seeming confused lately." Margaret's silence confirmed it before she spoke. "She called a few weeks ago, said she was worried about you living alone, mentioned you'd been forgetting things. I told her you seemed sharp as ever to me." "She's building a case," I said, Harrison's warning echoing in my mind. "Setting the stage to question my competence if I don't cooperate with her plans. That manipulative little—" Margaret caught herself. "What do you need from me, Judith?" "Just your support. And perhaps your presence at a family dinner next Sunday. I think it's time I made my intentions for my future and my property crystal clear to everyone." "Count on it," Margaret assured me. "And Judith, stand your ground. That house is yours, not an ATM for Amanda's wedding fantasies." By the time Amanda's BMW pulled into my driveway that evening, followed by Blake's sleek Audi, I had transformed my dining room into what Harrison might have called a position of strength. Spread across the polished mahogany table were my property, deed, retirement account statements, the file containing my home's complete renovation history and current value assessment, completed by my insurance company, not Amanda's convenient real estate friend, and most importantly, my carefully maintained household budget showing exactly how comfortably I managed on my teacher's pension. I had also prepared a simple dinner, not out of obligation, but to demonstrate that this was my home, where I established the terms of engagement. The aroma of rosemary roasted chicken filled the house, a deliberate reminder of the family meals I had provided for decades. Amanda entered without knocking, a habit that suddenly struck me as presumptuous rather than familiar. Blake followed, his tall frame slightly stooped as though already apologetic for the conversation to come. "Mom," Amanda greeted me with a quick cheek kiss. "You remember Blake?" "Of course," I smiled, extending my hand. "Congratulations on your engagement. Amanda's very happy." Blake shook my hand, his grip firmer than I remembered. "Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. We're very excited about our plans." "I've made dinner," I said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "We can talk while we eat." Amanda glanced toward the dining room, noting the papers spread across the table. "What's all that?" "Documentation we'll discuss after dinner," I replied pleasantly. "Wine?" Throughout the meal, I asked about their wedding plans, listening with genuine interest as they described the cliffside ceremony, the reception overlooking the Aegean, the week of excursions planned for their guests. Their enthusiasm was real and in other circumstances might have been infectious. "It sounds lovely," I said sincerely as I cleared our plates. "Different from what I might have chosen, but perfectly suited to both of you." "That's why we need your help, Mrs. Morgan," Blake said, speaking directly to me for perhaps the first time that evening. "Amanda's described your house, and I agree it makes perfect sense to leverage that asset now, when you could benefit from the sale and help us create this once-in-a-lifetime experience." The presumption stung, especially coming from this man I barely knew, but I kept my expression neutral as I led them into the dining room, where I took my seat at the head of the table. "Before we discuss my home," I said calmly, "I'd like to clarify a few things about my financial situation. For the next 15 minutes, I methodically walked them through my finances, not with complete transparency, but with enough detail to establish that I was neither wealthy enough to casually fund a luxury wedding, nor struggling enough to require downsizing for my own good. As you can see, I concluded, I'm living within my means in a home that's fully paid for. My retirement accounts are structured to support me through my expected lifetime, with some margin for healthcare needs. What I cannot do, what I will not do, is liquidate my primary asset to fund an expense that, frankly, exceeds reasonable expectations for parental contribution. Amanda's expression had grown increasingly rigid throughout my presentation. Now she burst out, "So you're refusing to help? After everything I've done, visiting you every month, calling you every week, including you in my life when most of my friends barely speak to their parents, this is how you repay my devotion?" The characterization of our relationship as transactional, rather than loving, hit me like a physical blow. Was this truly how she viewed our connection? As a series of deposits into an emotional bank account that she could now withdraw against? "Amanda," I said carefully, "I'm offering you $15,000 for your wedding. That's a generous gift, not an obligation. The fact that you see it as insufficient speaks to expectations I never agreed to and cannot fulfill." "Can't or won't?" she challenged, color rising in her cheeks. "Both," I replied evenly. "I can't sell my home without compromising my future security, and I won't uproot my life for an expense I consider excessive." Blake cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. With the escalating tension, "Perhaps we could look at other options. A home equity loan, maybe? That way you keep the house but access some of its value." "For what purpose?" I asked directly. "To fund a wedding that costs more than many people's annual salaries? I'm sorry, but no. My offer stands at $15,000. If that's not sufficient, you'll need to adjust your plans or find alternative funding." Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This isn't about money. This is about you refusing to support me at the most important moment of my life." Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what Blake's mother said when I told her you were hesitating? That perhaps you didn't approve of our match. That maybe you didn't think I was good enough for the Hamilton family." "I'm sure I never gave her any reason to think that," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the emotional manipulation attempt. "Your actions speak for themselves," Amanda insisted. "Every other parent is contributing. Only you are refusing." "I'm not refusing to contribute," I corrected. "I'm refusing to sell my home. There's a significant difference." Amanda turned to Blake. "I told you this would happen. I told you she'd choose this. This pile of old wood and plaster over my happiness." Blake looked distinctly uncomfortable, caught between loyalty to his fiancée and the obvious unreasonableness of her position. "Amanda, maybe we should—" "No," she cut him off. "I'm done discussing this." She turned back to me, her expression hardening into something I barely recognized. "Mom, I'm only going to say this once. Either you agree to list this house by the end of the week, or don't expect an invitation to my wedding. I'm serious. I won't have you there if this is how little you value my dreams." The ultimatum hung in the air between us, breathtaking in its cruelty. Behind Amanda, I could see Blake's expression shift from discomfort to genuine shock. "Amanda," he murmured, "you don't mean that." "I absolutely do," she insisted, not taking her eyes from my face. "Well, Mom, what's it going to be? Your house or your daughter's wedding?" I took a measured breath, willing my voice to remain steady, despite the hurt lancing through my chest. "If those are truly my only options, then I have to choose my home. Not because I value it above you, but because I won't be coerced into a decision that compromises my security and dignity." Amanda's face flushed dark red. "Then we have nothing more to discuss. Come on, Blake. We're leaving." Blake hesitated, clearly conflicted. "Mrs. Morgan, It's fine, Blake," I assured him quietly. "Go with Amanda. but know that my door remains open, even if I can't meet her demands." As they left, Amanda's parting words cut to the bone. "When you're sitting alone in this mausoleum of a house and wondering why your grandchildren don't know you, remember this was your choice." The front door slammed with finality, leaving me alone with the scattered papers and the echoing silence of a home that suddenly felt both precious and painful. I gathered the documents slowly, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline of confrontation ebbed, leaving raw emotion in its wake. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was a house, even one as beloved as mine, worth this rupture with my only child? As if in answer, my eyes fell on a framed photo on the sideboard. Amanda at her college graduation, beaming between me and my sister, Margaret. We had worked so hard to give her that opportunity, extra tutoring I could barely afford, countless late nights helping with applications, the second job I had taken to ensure she graduated debt-free. I had always given her what she needed to thrive, often at significant personal cost. But this demand wasn't about need. It was about entitlement, about viewing my primary asset as rightfully hers to liquidate for a lavish celebration. Bone-tired, I sank into my favorite armchair in the living room, surrounded by the carefully restored Victorian details that had been my passion project for decades. Through the bay window, moonlight illuminated the garden where this conflict had begun just 24 hours earlier. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "How did it go?" I replied simply, "I've been disinvited from the wedding unless I sell the house." Her response came instantly. "I'll be there in an hour. Don't you dare second-guess yourself." As I waited for my sister's arrival, I realized that despite the pain of Amanda's ultimatum, my resolve had only strengthened. Harrison's plan for a charitable remainder trust suddenly felt not just practical, but right. A way to ensure this home would serve a purpose beyond being a financial asset for either Amanda or myself. Tomorrow, I would call Harrison and accelerate our timeline. The betrayal I had experienced tonight had clarified something essential. My home deserved protection, not just during my lifetime, but beyond it. And I deserved to live my remaining years on my own terms, not as an ATM for my daughters. Extravagance. The house creaked and settled around me, a familiar symphony of sounds that had become the soundtrack of my life. This wasn't just property. It was the physical embodiment of my independence, my creativity, my resilience after Amanda's father had left us both. I would not surrender it. Not for a wedding. Not for an ultimatum. Not even for the daughter I still loved, despite everything. As headlights swept across my front window announcing Margaret's arrival, I stood and straightened, my shoulders. The battle lines had been drawn more starkly than I could have imagined, but I was not without resources, allies, or determination. The house would remain mine, and what happened next would be on my terms, not Amanda's. Margaret stayed with me until well past midnight, her steady presence a balm for the raw wound of Amanda's ultimatum. We sat in my kitchen drinking tea like we had as girls in our parents' home, decades of shared history creating a shorthand that required few words. "You know she might come around," Margaret offered as she rinsed our mugs in the sink. "Once the initial tantrum passes and she realizes what she's giving up." "Maybe," I allowed, though I wasn't convinced. "But even if she does, something fundamental has changed. I can't unsee how she views me, as a resource rather than a person with my own needs and rights." Margaret dried her hands on a kitchen towel, her expression thoughtful. "What will you do now?" "Exactly what I planned before tonight, just with greater urgency. I'm calling Harrison first thing tomorrow to expedite the trust. I'll see Dr. Miller for the cognitive assessment next week. And I'll proceed with my life as I've designed it, not as Amanda demands it should be." After Margaret left, I slept surprisingly well, exhaustion overtaking emotional turmoil. Morning brought clarity and purpose rather than the crushing sadness I might have expected. As I moved through my morning routine, coffee on the porch, tending to my seedlings in the greenhouse, checking emails at my antique desk, each familiar action felt like an affirmation. This was my home, my sanctuary, my future. And I would protect it not just from Amanda's wedding demands, but for a purpose that would outlast both of us. Harrison answered my call on the first ring, as though he'd been expecting to hear from me. It was worse than anticipated, I told him, recounting Amanda's ultimatum. She's essentially disowned me unless I sell the house. He made a sound of disgust. Emotional blackmail, sadly predictable, but no less appalling. I need to move forward, with the trust arrangement immediately, I said. And I'm wondering if there are additional steps I should take to protect myself. There are, he confirmed. I'll have preliminary trust documents ready by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, I'd suggest documenting everything. Every conversation, every text, every interaction with Amanda or anyone acting on her behalf. If she's escalating to ultimatums this quickly, we should be prepared for further attempts at coercion. You think she might try something else? The question sent a chill through me despite the morning warmth. People who believe they're entitled to others' assets rarely accept no as a final answer, Harrison said, echoing his earlier warning. I don't mean to alarm you unnecessarily, but prudence suggests we prepare for various scenarios. After our call, I spent the morning creating a detailed timeline of Amanda's behavior, from her initial request through the ultimatum, including her comments to my sister about my supposed mental decline. The exercise was painful but clarifying, revealing a pattern I had been reluctant to acknowledge. This wasn't a sudden wedding-inspired overreach, but rather the culmination of an increasingly entitled attitude toward my resources. At noon, my doorbell rang, a delivery courier with an enormous floral arrangement and a thick cream envelope. The card inside read simply, "Mom, let's talk. Dinner at Le Ciel tonight, 7 p.m. I've taken the liberty of arranging a car service. Amanda." I stared at the ornate script, recognizing the expensive stationery from the papery Amanda favored for important communications. The gesture was classic Amanda, a grand display meant to smooth over conflict without actually addressing its cause. Le Ciel was the city's most exclusive restaurant, where Blake had proposed. The implication was clear: a public setting where I would be less, likely to refuse her, whatever talking entailed. 2 years ago, I would have accepted without question, grateful for the apparent olive branch. Even yesterday, I might have wavered, hoping reconciliation was possible. But today, with my documentation spread across my desk and Harrison's warnings fresh in my mind, I saw the invitation differently, not as a peace offering but as a strategic maneuver. I texted Amanda directly. "Thank you for the flowers. I'm not available for dinner tonight. I'm happy to speak when you're ready to talk without conditions or ultimatums." Her response came within seconds. "The car will be there at 6:30, Blake's. Parents are joining us. Please don't embarrass me by refusing." The addition of Blake's parents transformed the invitation from manipulation to ambush. Clearly, Amanda hoped their presence would pressure me into acquiescence. I could almost hear her planned introduction. "Mom's being difficult about helping with the wedding, but I'm sure she'll come around with your encouragement." "I won't be attending," I replied firmly. "Any discussion about my home or financial contributions to your wedding needs to happen privately, not with Blake's family present." "This isn't a negotiation," came her immediate response. "The Hamiltons are important to me. This dinner is happening. Be ready at 6:30. I set my phone down without replying and called Harrison instead. "She's escalating faster than I anticipated," he observed after I explained the situation. "Involving her future in-laws is a particularly aggressive move. It suggests she's recruiting allies to increase pressure on you." "What should I do?" I asked. "Simply refuse to attend?" "That's one option," he agreed, "though it will likely further strain your relationship. Another approach might be to attend but bring support of your own. Your sister, perhaps? That feels like turning a dinner into a battleground, I said uneasily. Make no mistake, Judith, this dinner is already a battleground. Amanda has chosen the terrain and is bringing reinforcements. You can either decline engagement or ensure you're not outnumbered. I considered his advice carefully. There's a third option, I said slowly. I could attend alone, but with absolute clarity about my boundaries and decisions already implemented. Bold, Harrison acknowledged, but risky. What's your thinking? If I refuse to attend, Amanda portrays me as unreasonable to Blake's family. If I bring Margaret, it becomes an obvious confrontation. But if I go alone, composed and resolute, having already secured my home through the trust, I let the thought hang between us. You're essentially calling her bluff, Harrison finished, demonstrating that her pressure tactics won't work while maintaining the high ground. It's not without merit, but you'd be walking into a situation designed to manipulate you. I've been manipulated by Amanda since she was 3 years old, I said dryly. At least now I recognize it for what it is. Harrison chuckled. Fair point. If you choose this path, I'd suggest we accelerate dramatically. I can have the trust documents ready for signature by 5 wows today if I clear my afternoon schedule. It would mean making some decisions more quickly than we'd planned. Do it, I said without hesitation. I'll be at your office at 5 Lao. The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of activity. I confirmed my appointment with Dr. Miller for a comprehensive cognitive assessment scheduled for Friday morning. I arranged a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss restructuring some investments to align with the trust arrangements. I even called my home insurance agent to verify my coverage was current and comprehensive. Each action strengthened my resolve. By the time I arrived at Harrison's office at precisely 5 hours, I felt armored with preparation and clarity. The trust documents were more extensive than I had anticipated. Nearly 40 pages of legal language creating the Judith Morgan Heritage Home Trust. The arrangement was elegant in its simplicity. I would retain full rights to live in and enjoy my property throughout my lifetime, but upon my death, the house would transfer to the local historical society with specific provisions for its preservation and partial use as a community arts center focused on children's programs. The key provision is here. Harrison pointed to a section titled Irrevocable Transfer. Once you sign these documents, the house can no longer be sold for proceeds that would benefit either you or Amanda. Its fate is legally sealed. Preservation as a historic property and community resource. And my right to remain here is absolute, I confirmed. Completely protected, Harrison assured me. You can live here exactly as you do now. Make any changes or improvements you wish, even rent it temporarily if you decided to travel extensively. The only thing you cannot do is convert it back to a liquid asset. I signed the documents without hesitation, feeling a profound sense of rightness as the pen moved across the signature lines. This wasn't spite toward Amanda, but rather clarity about my values, preserving not just a beautiful old house, but creating a legacy that would benefit the community long after I was gone. I'll file these immediately, Harrison promised. By the time you arrive at dinner tonight, your home will be legally protected from any pressure to sell. We'll record the trust with the county property office first thing tomorrow morning, as I prepared for the dinner, selecting a sage green dress that had always given me confidence. I felt remarkably calm. The car Amanda had arranged, a sleek black town car with a uniformed driver, arrived precisely at 6:30. I noted with ironic amusement that she had spared no expense for this attempt at coercion. Le Ciel occupied the top floor of the city's tallest building, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the skyline and river beyond. As the maitre d' led me to the private dining room Amanda had reserved, I caught my reflection in the mirror-lined hallway. Gray hair elegantly styled, posture straight, expression composed. Not a confused elderly woman who needed her assets, managed by others, but a dignified professional who had made deliberate choices about her own future. The dining room fell silent as I entered. Amanda, Blake, and an older couple who must be the Hamiltons were already seated around a circular table draped in pristine white linen. Amanda's expression flickered between surprise that I had actually come and satisfaction that her plan was proceeding. "Mom," she rose to greet me with an air kiss that didn't quite connect. "I'm so glad you could join us. Let me introduce Blake's parents, Catherine and Richard Hamilton." Catherine Hamilton was a polished woman in her early 60s, blonde hair expertly colored and styled, jewelry subtle but obviously expensive. Richard was tall and distinguished, with the same serious eyes as his son Blake. Both rose to shake my hand with the practiced cordiality of people accustomed to social obligations. "How lovely to meet you," Catherine offered. "Amanda has told us so much about you and your charming home." "Has she?" I replied pleasantly, accepting the glass of champagne a waiter materialized to offer. "I hope she mentioned my decision to place it in a historic preservation trust as well." Amanda's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips. "What?" I smiled serenely, taking my seat at the table. "Yes, I finalized the arrangements this afternoon. My Victorian will be preserved in perpetuity as a heritage property and community art space after my lifetime. I'm quite pleased with the arrangement. It ensures the house will benefit the neighborhood children for generations to come." "What are you talking about?" Amanda's voice had risen slightly, drawing a concerned glance from Blake. "What trust?" "An irrevocable charitable trust," I explained, directing my words to the table at large rather than just Amanda. "I've been considering it for some time, and recent events accelerated my timeline. The house will remain my residence for life, but is now legally committed to public benefit afterward. The paperwork was filed this afternoon." Richard Hamilton's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of something like respect crossing his features. Catherine looked confused, glancing between Amanda and me as though trying to decode subtext. Blake studied his water glass intensely, clearly uncomfortable. "You can't do that," Amanda said flatly. "Not without discussing it with me first." "Actually, I can and did," I corrected gently. "As the sole owner of the property, I have full legal right to determine its future. The trust is now irrevocable." "Meaning what, exactly?" Catherine asked, curiosity evidently overcoming her reluctance to engage directly. "Meaning the house cannot be sold," I explained. "Not now, not ever. It will remain a private residence during my lifetime and become a community resource afterward." "But what about—" Amanda began, then caught herself, darting a glance at the Hamiltons. "What about our discussion? About your future needs?" "My needs are quite secure," I assured her. "My pension, investments, and the tax benefits from the charitable trust ensure I'll be comfortable for whatever years remain to me. And the house I love will serve a meaningful purpose rather than being converted to wedding funds or developer profits." A heavy silence fell over the table. I took a calm sip of my champagne, feeling not triumphant but centered. This wasn't about winning a power struggle, but about establishing the truth of my autonomy. "Perhaps," Richard Hamilton said carefully, "we should order? I understand the Dover sole here is exceptional." Dinner proceeded with superficial pleasantries layered over crackling tension. Catherine asked polite questions about my teaching career. Richard discussed recent renovations to their own historical home in the suburbs. Blake maintained a tactful silence broken only by occasional comments about the food or wine. Amanda barely spoke, her expression cycling between disbelief, anger, and calculation. I could almost see her mind racing, searching for some way to challenge or circumvent what I had done. As dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate soufflé, identical to the one that had concealed Blake's proposal ring, Amanda finally addressed me directly. "We need to talk privately," she said, voice tight with controlled emotion. "This situation isn't resolved." "There's nothing to resolve," I replied, evenly. "My home is secured in a trust. I've offered $15,000 toward your wedding. Those facts aren't changing, regardless of pressure, ultimatums, or attempts to embarrass me in front of Blake's family. Catherine Hamilton set down her dessert spoon with a gentle clink. I think I'm missing some context here, she said carefully. Amanda, you mentioned your mother was considering downsizing to help with wedding expenses, but this sounds like a different narrative entirely. Before Amanda could respond, I met Catherine's gaze directly. I was never considering downsizing. Amanda informed me I should sell my home to fund a larger portion of the wedding and relocate to a retirement community. When I declined, she delivered an ultimatum: either sell my house or be excluded from the wedding. Catherine's perfectly maintained composure slipped momentarily, shock registering in her widened eyes. I see? Mom, Amanda hissed, color flooding her cheeks. That's not what happened. It's precisely what happened, I countered calmly. I have the text messages if you'd like to review them. Richard cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. I believe this is a conversation best continued privately between mother and daughter. Blake, perhaps we should give them some space. As the Hamilton family excused themselves with practiced grace, I noted their expressions: Catherine's barely concealed disapproval, Richard's studied neutrality, Blake's evident discomfort. Whatever version of events Amanda had shared with them clearly hadn't included ultimatums or demands to liquidate my primary asset. When we were alone, Amanda's composure crumbled entirely. How could you? She demanded, voice raw with emotion. You've humiliated me in front of Blake's family, made me look like some kind of gold digger. I simply stated facts, I replied. If those facts are embarrassing, perhaps that's worth reflecting on. You've ruined everything, she continued, tears spilling onto her cheeks. The Hamiltons will think I'm after their money now, too. And you've made it impossible for me to have my dream wedding. No, I corrected her gently. I've made it impossible for you to have an extravagant wedding at the expense of my home and security. There's a significant difference. Your dream wedding is still entirely possible within reasonable financial parameters. Amanda stared at me as though seeing a stranger. You did this on purpose. You knew I was bringing the Hamiltons tonight to help convince you. Yes, I acknowledged. Just as you knew bringing them would increase pressure on me to acquiesce. We both made calculated decisions, Amanda. The difference is that mine was about protecting myself, while yours was about manipulating me. She pushed back from the table, abruptly. I can't even look at you right now. If you think this trust thing changes anything about my ultimatum, you're wrong. Either find another way to contribute substantially to this wedding, or don't expect to be part of it. Or my life. Going forward. As she stormed out of the private dining room, leaving me alone with half-eaten desserts and a table set for 5, I felt an unexpected sense of peace rather than devastation. The ultimatum had been delivered again, but its power to wound had diminished significantly. I signaled for the check, unsurprised to find Amanda had departed without addressing the bill. As I provided my credit card to the discreet waiter, I reflected on the evening's true significance. I had made my decision, not just about the house, but about reclaiming authority over my own life. Tonight wasn't about a wedding or even a property. It was about finally recognizing that love without respect wasn't enough, that boundaries weren't selfish, and that my needs mattered just as much as my daughter's desires. The car Amanda had arranged was long gone, but the spring evening was pleasant for walking. As I made my way through downtown toward the residential streets that would lead me home, each step felt like progress toward a future I was designing rather than having thrust upon me. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. How did it go? I smiled slightly as I typed my response. I signed the trust. The house is protected. Amanda is furious. I'm surprisingly okay. Her reply came immediately. Proud of you, sis. This isn't over, but you've won the important battle, the one with yourself. She was right, I realized. The most significant victory wasn't securing the house against Amanda's demands, but recognizing my own worth enough to fight for it. Whatever came next, reconciliation or extended conflict, I would face it from a position of strength and clarity. The house awaited me, its Victorian silhouette outlined against the darkening sky as I approached. No longer just a structure or an asset, but a symbol of my reclaimed independence and a future legacy that transcended family drama. I had made my decision, and for the first time in decades, that decision prioritized my own well-being above all else. The week following the disastrous dinner at Le Ciel passed in a strange blend of calm productivity and emotional aftershocks. Each morning, I woke with momentary heaviness, remembering Amanda's ultimatum and furious exit. But as I moved through my home, now legally secured against her demands, the weight gradually lifted, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Friday, I completed my cognitive assessment with Dr. Miller, a sharp-eyed geriatric specialist whose gentle manner belied her forensic thoroughness. For 3 hours, she tested every aspect of my mental functioning: memory, reasoning, judgment, spatial awareness, language skills. "Mrs. Morgan," she said as we concluded, "I rarely share preliminary findings before completing my report, but I can tell you're concerned. Your cognitive function is excellent across all domains, well above average for your age group, and frankly, above average for many people decades younger. Could you include that specific comparison in your report?" I asked. Given the circumstances, it might be important. Dr. Miller's gaze sharpened with professional concern. "Are you anticipating a competency challenge?" "I hope not," I replied honestly. "But my daughter has recently begun suggesting I'm becoming forgetful or confused. I'd prefer to be prepared if those comments evolve into something more formal." She nodded, understanding immediately. "I'll make the comparative assessments explicit and provide standardized scores. Your attorney would find those particularly useful if needed." As I left her office, report scheduled to be delivered the following week, another piece of my protection plan fell into place. I wasn't just securing my home, but fortifying my autonomy against any potential challenges. The weekend brought steady, spring rain that kept me indoors, puttering around the house that now felt more deeply mine than ever. I reorganized my library, sorting books I'd accumulated over decades of teaching and reading. I baked bread from my grandmother's recipe, the scent of yeast and warm flour filling the kitchen. I played the piano that had sat largely untouched since Amanda's childhood lessons, surprised by how quickly my fingers remembered Mozart and Chopin. Each activity felt like reclamation, of space, of time, of pleasure for its own sake rather than in service to others. Without the looming pressure of Amanda's wedding demands, I found myself remembering interests and passions long set aside. On Monday morning, Harrison called with news. "The trust has been properly recorded with the county. Your home is officially protected for perpetuity as the Judith Morgan Heritage House and Community Arts Center. Congratulations." "Thank you, Harrison," I said, genuinely moved by hearing the formal name spoken aloud. "It feels right, like something I should have done years ago, regardless of Amanda's demands." "The best decisions often feel that way," he observed, as if they were waiting for us to recognize their rightness. I spent the afternoon drafting a detailed vision document for the trust, outlining my hopes for how the property might serve the community after my lifetime. I imagined children's art classes in the sunroom that faced the garden, poetry readings in the library, perhaps music lessons on my restored piano. The house that had nurtured one child, however complicated that relationship had become, might nurture hundreds more through creative expression. By Wednesday, with no word from Amanda, I began wondering if her ultimatum about cutting me from her life had been more than angry hyperbole. I felt simultaneously saddened and liberated by the possibility. Perhaps this rupture, however painful, was necessary for us both to relate as adults, rather than in our entrenched mother-daughter patterns. That evening, an unexpected knock at my door revealed Blake Hamilton standing awkwardly on my porch, hands thrust deep in his suit pockets. "Mrs. Morgan?" he greeted me, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and—" He trailed off, the excuse obviously fabricated. "It's fine, Blake," I assured him, stepping back to allow him entry. "Would you like some tea? Or perhaps something stronger?" "Tea would be great," he said with evident relief, following me to the kitchen where I set the kettle to boil. As we waited for the water to heat, Blake gazed around my kitchen with interest. "This is a beautiful home," he offered. "I can see why you wouldn't want to sell it." "Thank you," I replied, placing mugs and a honey jar on the table. "It's been a labor of love for 30 years. He nodded, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "Mrs. Morgan, I want to apologize for that dinner. It was inappropriate. I had no idea Amanda had issued an ultimatum about selling your house. She told us you were hesitant about helping with the wedding but needed some encouragement." "I gathered as much from your parents' reaction," I said, pouring the boiling water over tea bags. "They seemed surprised by the actual situation." Blake grimaced. "They were shocked, to be honest. My mother particularly. He hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "She had concerns about what it revealed about Amanda's character. I felt a complex surge of emotions, defensive maternal instinct warring with my own similar concerns. Amanda has many wonderful qualities," I said finally. "But she has developed certain expectations about financial support that have become problematic." Blake nodded, staring into his tea as if it might offer guidance. "That's partly why I'm here. We've had some difficult conversations since that night. Amanda is still upset about the trust, but I'm actually relieved." This surprised me. "Relieved?" He met my eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "I love Amanda deeply, Mrs. Morgan, but I've been troubled by her approach to money, both mine and her expectations of others. Watching her demand you sell your home to fund our wedding forced me to acknowledge concerns I've been avoiding." "I see," I said carefully, sensing this conversation veered into territory requiring discretion. "Have you discussed these concerns with Amanda?" "I'm trying," he said with a sigh. "It's challenging. When I suggested scaling back the wedding to something we could manage without pressuring you, she accused me of not valuing her enough, of trying to give her less than she deserves." The phrasing was so quintessentially Amanda that I felt a pang of recognition. How many times had I heard similar words when refusing her childhood demands for designer clothes or expensive summer camps we couldn't afford? "That must be difficult," I offered neutrally, unwilling to criticize my daughter to her fiancé despite our current estrangement. "It's making me question things," Blake admitted, his expression troubled. "Not my love for Amanda, but whether we share fundamental values about money, family, and respect." He glanced up, suddenly looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be burdening you with this, especially given your situation with her." "It's all right," I assured him. "Despite current tensions, I care deeply about Amanda's happiness, and healthy marriages require alignment on fundamental values." Blake traced the rim of his mug thoughtfully. "That's why I came, really, to understand better. Amanda has always described you as generous to a fault, someone who'd do anything for her. Yet you drew this firm boundary about your home. I needed to see for myself if you were the unreasonable obstacle she's portrayed, or if there's more to the story." The characterization stung, though it didn't surprise me. "And what have you concluded?" I asked. He gestured around my kitchen, at the hand-painted tiles I'd installed myself, the herb garden flourishing on the windowsill, the collection of well-used cookbooks lining open shelves. "I see someone who's created a meaningful life and beautiful home. Someone making reasonable decisions to protect their future. Not an obstacle or a problem to be managed." His perception was so refreshingly different from Amanda's that I felt tears threaten unexpectedly. I blinked them away, focusing on stirring honey into my tea. "Thank you for that," I said simply. Blake shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else. My parents have offered to cover the remaining third of the wedding. Costs, the portion Amanda was expecting from you. They can afford it easily, and they'd rather see the celebration scaled back slightly than have this conflict continue." "That's very generous of them," I said cautiously, wondering where this was leading. "Amanda refused," Blake said, looking genuinely perplexed. "She said it's the principle of the matter now, that you need to contribute substantially or remain uninvited." I absorbed this information slowly. If Amanda was refusing alternative funding that would solve the practical problem, then this conflict had evolved beyond money. It had become about control, about forcing my compliance as proof of her power. "In our relationship." "I see," I said finally. "And how do you feel about that position?" Blake ran both hands through his hair, disheveling it completely. "Honestly, I think it's insane, excluding your mother from your wedding over money when alternatives exist. I can't support that. But Amanda won't budge. She's always been determined," I offered, the understatement bringing a knowing look from Blake. "Mrs. Morgan, I need to ask you directly. Is there any compromise position you might consider? Not selling your home, obviously, but some middle ground between your current offer and Amanda's expectations." I considered the question carefully, wanting to be fair both to myself and to this young man genuinely caught in a difficult position. "My financial offer remains $15,000, I said finally. "That's a carefully considered amount that I can provide without compromising my security. But perhaps there are non-financial contributions I could make, helping with planning. Details, contributing my skills rather than additional funds." Blake nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable. I'll try to suggest it, though I'm not optimistic given her current mindset." As he prepared to leave, Blake paused in my entryway, looking thoughtful. "Your house being preserved as a community arts center after your lifetime, that's a wonderful legacy, Mrs. Morgan. Far more meaningful than funding an extravagant party, even if it is our wedding." His sincerity touched me. "Thank you, Blake. Whatever happens between Amanda and me, I hope you'll stay in touch. You're a thoughtful young man." After he left, I wandered through my home with a strange sense of having crossed some invisible threshold. Blake's visit had revealed something important. This conflict wasn't simply between Amanda and me. It was highlighting fundamental questions about values, boundaries, and relationships that extended beyond our mother-daughter dynamic. The following morning brought another unexpected visitor. I was in the garden, taking advantage of the post-rain sunshine to stake my tomato plants, when a sleek silver car pulled into my driveway. Catherine Hamilton emerged, looking elegant even in casual slacks and a simple blouse. "Mrs. Morgan," she called, approaching across the lawn with more confidence than her son had shown. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I was hoping we might speak." I straightened from my gardening, brushing soil from my hands. "Of course, and please call me Judith." "Catherine," she offered in return, gesturing toward my garden. "You've created something beautiful here. Those heritage roses are spectacular." Was surprised by her knowledge of horticulture. "Thank you. They're a passion project. Old varieties that have nearly disappeared from modern gardens. I can tell," she said, bending to examine a particularly lush bloom. "The souvenir de la Malmaison, isn't it? Bourbon rose, introduced around 1843. "Exactly. Right," I confirmed, impressed. "Are you a gardener?" "In another life," she smiled. "Before corporate law consumed my time. Now I mostly admire other people's efforts while promising myself I'll return to it in retirement." I led her to the porch, where we settled into wicker chairs with glasses of iced tea, the garden spreading before us in well-tended abundance. "I imagine you're wondering why I've come," Catherine said directly, setting aside social preambles. It's about Amanda, of course, and the wedding situation. I assumed as much, I acknowledged. Blake visited yesterday. He mentioned that, she nodded. He's very troubled by the whole affair. Richard and I are as well. I waited, sensing Catherine had a specific purpose for this visit beyond general concern. I want to be clear, she continued, that we don't condone Amanda's behavior toward you. Demanding you sell your home for a wedding is, well, frankly, it's appalling. And refusing our offer to cover the costs while maintaining her ultimatum to exclude you is equally troubling. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. It means a great deal. Catherine set her glass down precisely, aligning it with the coaster, in a gesture of someone accustomed to careful control. I didn't come just to offer sympathy, however. I'm concerned about what this situation reveals about Amanda's character and values, and what that might mean for Blake. The statement hung between us, a mother's concern about her son's choice of partner, delivered to that partner's mother. Delicate territory indeed. That's a legitimate concern, I acknowledged, choosing honesty over defense. Amanda has many wonderful qualities. She's intelligent, determined, capable. But she has also developed certain expectations and attitudes about money and support that I've perhaps enabled over the years. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your candor. Most mothers would immediately defend their child. I love Amanda deeply, I said. But love doesn't require denying reality. She's behaving poorly in this situation, and I won't pretend otherwise. Blake is questioning the marriage, Catherine said directly. Not officially, not publicly, but I know my son. He's deeply unsettled by Amanda's response to all this. The news sent a complex wave of emotions through me. Concern for Amanda's happiness, worry about her reaction if Blake withdrew, but also a quiet relief that he was seriously evaluating their compatibility before marriage rather than after. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. Though perhaps better to address fundamental differences now rather than years into a marriage. Precisely our thinking, Catherine agreed, which brings me to my actual purpose. Richard and I would like to invite you to dinner at our home next week. Just the four of us. You, me, Richard, and Blake. No Amanda. The invitation surprised me. May I ask why? Because we need to understand the situation more fully before advising our son, she replied frankly. Blake is torn between his love for Amanda and serious concerns about her character. Your perspective would be valuable. I considered the request carefully. Accepting meant further deepening the divide between Amanda and me. She would view it as the ultimate betrayal, consorting with the enemy behind her back. Yet refusing meant missing an opportunity to provide context that might actually help. All parties navigate this difficult situation. I appreciate your invitation, I said finally. But I need to be transparent about my position. I won't disparage Amanda to her future in-laws, even given our current conflict. If your hope is to gather ammunition against her, I can't participate. Catherine's expression softened unexpectedly. That's not our intent at all. In fact, your response just now, protecting your daughter despite everything, tells me volumes about your character. We're trying to understand the full picture, including Amanda's background and your family dynamics, to help Blake make an informed decision. Nothing more sinister than that. I studied her, sensing genuine concern rather than manipulation. Then yes, I'll come. Though I hope you understand the difficult position this places me in. Completely, she assured me. And if it helps, I would do exactly the same for Blake if the situations were reversed. Some maternal instincts transcend conflicts. As Catherine left, promising to email details for the dinner, I returned to my garden with mixed emotions. The situation had expanded beyond my initial boundary setting about the house, evolving into something that potentially threatened Amanda's engagement. While I couldn't condone her behavior, I still hoped for her happiness. That evening, I tried calling Amanda directly for the first time since our confrontation at Le Ciel. The call went straight to voicemail, suggesting she had blocked my number, a childish but unsurprising reaction. I sent a text instead, uncertain if it would be delivered. "I'm still here when you're ready to talk. No conditions except mutual respect." No response came, but I hadn't really expected one. The ball was in Amanda's court now. I had secured my home, established my boundaries, and remained open to reconciliation without capitulation. What happened next would depend on her capacity for growth and self-reflection. As May bloomed into full spring glory around my Victorian, I found myself transformed as well. The fear and guilt that had initially accompanied my refusal of Amanda's demands had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence in my own worth and rights. I was sleeping better, laughing more with Margaret during our regular calls, even considering a 2-week painting workshop in New Mexico I had previously dismissed as impractical. My home, once nearly sacrificed to my daughter's extravagant demands, had become something more profound, a symbol of my reclaimed autonomy and a future legacy that would outlast personal conflicts. Each room I moved through, each garden bed I tended, felt imbued with renewed purpose and meaning. Whatever happened with Amanda, reconciliation or extended estrangement, I had found solid ground within myself. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected transformation of all. June arrived with a heat wave that turned my garden into a sanctuary of early morning and late evening tending, the midday sun too fierce for comfortable work. In those golden dawn hours, hands deep in soil still cool from the night, I often found myself reflecting on how much had changed in just 2 months. The dinner with the Hamiltons had gone surprisingly well, a thoughtful conversation where I'd shared stories of Amanda's childhood and our relationship without either sainthood or vilification. Catherine and Richard had been equally candid about Blake's background and their concerns about the values mismatch becoming apparent between the couple. "We don't want to interfere," Richard had said as he walked me to my car afterward. "But we also can't pretend we don't see warning signs. Your integrity throughout this situation has been remarkable, Judith. I still hope they can work things out," I'd told him honestly. "If Amanda can recognize that love doesn't entitle her to control or unlimited financial support." In the 3 weeks since that dinner, Amanda had maintained her silence, though Margaret reported receiving a lengthy email condemning me for choosing a house over family and trying to recruit her to my side. Margaret had responded with characteristic directness. "The only person making ultimatums is you, Amanda. Mom's offering what she can while protecting her future. That's not rejection. It's healthy boundaries." The wedding date was now just 3 months away, with deposits presumably needing finalization and arrangements requiring confirmation. I tried not to dwell on how the date might pass without my presence, focusing instead on the life I was rebuilding, one choice, one day at a time. Dr. Miller's cognitive assessment had arrived, confirming what we both already knew. My mental faculties were exceptional for any age, with particular strengths in verbal reasoning, problem-solving, and executive function. Harrison had filed it with my updated legal documents, creating what he called a fortress of evidence should Amanda ever attempt to challenge my competence. The unseasonably hot morning of June 12th found me in my garden earlier than usual, harvesting the first ripe tomatoes before the heat could split their delicate skins. The distinctive sound of Amanda's BMW pulling into my driveway froze me mid-reach, aroma tomato suspended between vine and basket. I straightened slowly, watching as my daughter emerged from her car. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen, her dark circles shadowing her eyes despite careful makeup. She wore a simple linen dress rather than her usual tailored business attire, the kind of casual elegance that required significant effort to appear effortless. "Mom?" she called, spotting me among the tomato trellises. "Can we talk?" The normalcy of the greeting after weeks of ultimatums and silence was jarring. I nodded, gesturing toward the house, It's going to be brutally hot soon. Let's go inside. My kitchen, the heart of the home she had demanded I surrender. Amanda perched awkwardly on a stool at the counter, declining my offer of coffee or tea. I busied myself washing the harvested tomatoes, giving her space to begin whatever conversation had finally brought her here. "Your garden looks amazing," she offered after an uncomfortable silence. "Those heirloom varieties you planted last year really took off." "They did," I agreed, placing the tomatoes in a blue ceramic bowl that had been a gift from Amanda years earlier, a Mother's Day present from her college days when her tastes had been simpler and her expectations less grandiose. Another. Silence stretched between us until finally Amanda drew a deep breath. "Blake and I have postponed the wedding." I set down the towel I'd been using to dry my hands, giving her my full attention. "I see. May I ask why?" She traced an invisible pattern on the countertop, not meeting my eyes. "We're reassessing our compatibility and shared values," she said, the phrasing clearly borrowed from couples therapy or Blake himself. "Which basically means he thinks I'm a terrible person for how I treated you, and I think he's betraying me by taking your side." I chose my words carefully. "I'm sorry you're going through this difficult time. Despite our conflict, I would never wish unhappiness for you." "Wouldn't you?" she challenged, a flash of the anger that had dominated our last encounters. "You placed your house in an irrevocable trust rather than help with my wedding. You had dinner with Blake's parents behind my back. Your actions directly contributed to where we are now." Rather than responding defensively, I considered her perspective. "I can understand why it feels that way to you. From my viewpoint, I protected my home and future from demands that felt unreasonable while remaining open to reconciliation. But I recognize the outcome has brought you pain, which was never my intention." Amanda's expression flickered with surprise at my response, perhaps expecting the defensive justification that had characterized many of our past conflicts. "Blake says we need to establish healthy financial boundaries before marriage," she continued, making air quotes with visible frustration. "He wants a prenuptial agreement now, separate accounts, and a budget for the wedding that's aligned with our actual resources without external pressure." More air quotes, more evident disdain. Those sound like reasonable precautions before joining your lives? I observed neutrally. "He changed after that dinner with his parents," Amanda accused. "Whatever you told them." "I told them the truth," I interrupted gently. "About our conflict, yes, but also about your many wonderful qualities. I didn't attend that dinner to undermine you, Amanda." "Then why did you go? Why meet secretly with my future in-laws when you knew it would hurt me?" I considered her question. Seriously, because they asked for my perspective directly, and I believed honest communication might help everyone, including you, navigate a difficult situation. Refusing would have left them with only their own assumptions. Amanda fell silent, her internal struggle visible in the tension around her mouth and eyes. Finally, she asked in a smaller voice, "Did you tell them I was awful, entitled, a spoiled brat demanding her mother sell her house?" "No," I said firmly. "I told them you were intelligent, determined, and passionate, that you've always had clear visions of what you want and the drive to pursue it, that you've achieved impressive professional success through hard work and talent. And yes, I acknowledged that we have different perspectives on financial support and boundaries." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes, surprising us both. "Blake says he doesn't recognize who I've become through all this. That planning the wedding has revealed a side of me that concerns him deeply." Her voice caught. "He says I'm prioritizing a party over relationships that matter." The vulnerability in her admission touched me, despite everything. "What do you think about that assessment?" She wiped at her eyes angrily. "I think he doesn't understand how important this wedding is, not just the ceremony but what it represents. The Hamiltons have everything: generational wealth, social connections, the kind of ease I've worked so hard to achieve. This wedding was my chance to show I belong in their world. The admission revealed more than perhaps she intended, that the extravagant Santorini wedding had never really been about Blake or even their relationship, but about Amanda's sense of legitimacy and belonging. "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly, maternal instinct overriding recent conflicts. "You belong wherever you are, exactly as you are. No party, however lavish, can provide that sense of worthiness if you don't feel it within yourself." Amanda looked up sharply as if to argue, then deflated visibly. "That's what my therapist said too." "You're seeing a therapist?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Blake's condition for not calling off the engagement entirely," she admitted. "Individual sessions for me, couples counseling for both of us. Apparently my approach to money and relationships needs serious examination." The air quotes were back, though with less conviction. I nodded encouragingly. "That sounds like a constructive approach. How do you feel about it?" "Honestly? Angry, humiliated, defensive." She sighed deeply. "But also, maybe a little relieved? Like maybe there's a path forward that doesn't require me to keep pushing for more and more to feel secure." The admission was so unexpected, so contrary to the entitled demands she'd made weeks earlier that I found myself momentarily speechless. Was this genuine reflection or simply a tactical retreat now that her wedding plans were threatened? "That's a significant insight," I managed finally. Amanda met my eyes directly for the first time. "I'm not here to ask for money again, or to apologize, really, because I'm still angry about the trust. I don't know why I came, except maybe because my therapist suggested I examine the origins of my attitudes toward financial support." The air quotes seemed almost reflexive now, a defensive distancing from uncomfortable insights. "Well, I'm glad you did come," I said simply. "Whatever your reasons." She glanced around my kitchen, at the gleaming copper pots hanging above the island, the herb garden thriving in the window, the handmade pottery from local artisans lining open shelves. "You really love this house, don't you? Not just as property or an investment, but actually love it." "I do," I confirmed. "It's been my project, my sanctuary, my most consistent relationship for 30 years. Every renovation, every garden bed, every color choice represents time and care and vision. It's not just walls and a roof, it's an extension of myself." Amanda absorbed this, looking thoughtful. "I never saw it that way. To me, it was always just the house I grew up in. Nice enough, but ultimately just a financial asset that could be liquidated when needed." "That's a fundamental difference in how we see the world," I observed. "Neither perspective is inherently wrong, but they lead to very different decisions and priorities." She nodded slowly. "My therapist talks about differentiating your needs from your wants. She says I've conflated the two for so long that I experience any boundary as rejection. The insight struck me as remarkably self-aware for someone who just weeks ago had demanded I sell my home as proof of maternal love. "That's a powerful realization," I offered. "And a difficult one to confront, I imagine." "It's humiliating," Amanda admitted bluntly. "Sitting in therapy realizing you've been behaving like an entitled brat at 40 years old isn't exactly a proud moment." A silence settled between us, not the tense, angry silence of our previous encounters, but something more contemplative, tentatively open. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "With the wedding? With Blake? With us?" Amanda sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. "The Santorini plan is officially canceled. We lost some deposits, but Blake's parents covered those without making me feel like a failure, which was unexpected kindness. If we go forward with a wedding at all, it will be local and significantly scaled back." "And your relationship?" "On probation, essentially," she admitted. 6 months of therapy and exploring whether our values are truly compatible. Blake says he loves me but won't marry someone who would estrange themselves from family over money. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, that Amanda's ultimatum to me about the wedding had ultimately led to Blake issuing his own ultimatum about their relationship. "And us?" I asked quietly. "Where do we go from here, Amanda?" She looked down at her hands, studying her engagement ring as if seeing it anew. "I don't know, Mom. I'm still angry about the trust, about you going to Blake's parents, about all of it, really. But my therapist says anger is often a secondary emotion masking more vulnerable feelings like hurt or fear." "That resonates with me," I acknowledged. "I've been angry too, but beneath that was hurt that you would reduce our relationship to financial transactions and fear that you saw me as a resource rather than a person with my own needs." Amanda flinched slightly at the characterization but didn't deny it. "I need time," she said finally, "to sort through all this, to figure out who I am beyond the reflexive demands and expectations I've built my life around. I can't promise immediate reconciliation or even understanding." "I respect that," I said, recognizing the honesty in her response even as it saddened me. "My door remains open, figuratively and literally. No ultimatums, no conditions beyond basic mutual respect." As Amanda prepared to leave, she paused in my entryway, looking at a framed photo I'd recently hung, a black and white image of her. As a little girl, maybe 5 years old, helping me plant tulip bulbs in what was then a much simpler garden. "I remember that day," she said softly. "You let me arrange the bulbs however I wanted, even though it meant the tulips came up in weird clusters instead of neat rows the next spring. You were so proud of those chaotic tulips." I smiled at the memory. "You told the neighbors you had designed a garden installation and tried to charge admission to view it." A reluctant smile tugged at Amanda's lips. "Entrepreneurial from the start." "Indeed," I agreed. "And creative in your own way, though different from mine." She touched the frame lightly. "I'll call next time, before visiting." "I'd appreciate that," I said, recognizing the small gesture of respect for what it was. A tentative first step toward healthier boundaries. After Amanda left, I returned to my garden, completing the harvest I'd abandoned at her arrival. The tomatoes were warm from the sun now, their distinctive earthy fragrance intensifying in the heat. I worked methodically, my mind processing the unexpected conversation and what it might mean for our future. That evening, as I prepared a simple dinner using the morning's harvest, my phone chimed with a text from Blake. "Thank you for whatever you said to Amanda today. First real breakthrough in weeks. There's hope." I smiled at the message but didn't reply, respecting the delicate balance of their relationship and my daughter's process. Whatever reconciliation might be possible between Amanda and me, between Amanda and Blake, would require time, patience, and genuine change, not just temporary accommodations to restore peace. The following Sunday, Margaret joined me for our now regular afternoon tea on the porch, eager for updates after hearing about Amanda's surprise visit. "So she's actually in therapy?" my sister marveled, helping herself to a scone. "Examining her attitude toward money and relationships? That's unexpected." "Indeed," I agreed. "Whether it leads to lasting change remains to be seen, but the self-awareness alone suggests growth I wouldn't have thought possible a month ago." Margaret studied me over the rim of her teacup. "And how are you doing with all this?" "Really?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm at peace with my decisions. The trust was absolutely the right choice, not just to prevent the sale for Amanda's wedding, but as a meaningful legacy that extends beyond family inheritance. I'm sad about the rupture with Amanda, but hopeful that we might eventually build something healthier than what existed before." "And in the meantime?" Margaret pressed. "While that reconciliation percolates?" "In the meantime," I smiled, "I've enrolled in that painting workshop in New Mexico I mentioned. 3 weeks in August, staying at a lovely artist's retreat in Santa Fe. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. 3 weeks away from your beloved house and garden? Who are you and what have you done with my homebody sister? I laughed, gesturing toward the garden that had been my primary focus for years. The dahlias will bloom whether I'm here to witness it or not. The house will stand firm. And I find I'm suddenly eager to expand my world beyond these familiar boundaries, beautiful as they are. The irony, Margaret observed wryly, that in trying to force you to give up your home, Amanda inadvertently sparked your willingness to leave it voluntarily for new experiences. Life is full of such paradoxes, I agreed. The house I was so determined to protect has begun to feel like a foundation rather than a constraint, a secure base from which to explore rather than a limitation. As the summer light softened toward evening, Margaret and I sat companionably on the porch, watching goldfinches dart among the echinacea in my front garden. The Victorian house behind us, the home I had refused to surrender, stood solid and serene, its future now secure regardless of family dynamics or wedding demands. The trust I had created as a defensive measure had evolved into something more meaningful, a legacy that would outlast me, providing creative space for generations of children and artists long after I was gone. The boundary I had established with Amanda, painful though it had been, had created room for potential growth and healthier relationship patterns. And I, at 65, found myself not diminished by the conflict, but expanded by it. More confident in my worth, more clear in my boundaries, more adventurous in my aspirations than I had been in decades. As summer deepened into July, signs of tentative reconciliation began to emerge. Amanda occasionally texted photos of interesting gardens she encountered, a wordless acknowledgement of my passion. I responded with updates on my tomato varieties or the hummingbird family that had nested in my wisteria. We were months, perhaps, years, from the easy relationship I might have wished for, but the silence had broken, replaced by cautious connection. Blake reported continued progress in their couples therapy, though the wedding remained postponed indefinitely while they built a stronger foundation for partnership. His parents invited me to their annual summer garden party, an invitation I accepted after confirming Amanda was comfortable with my attendance. We spoke briefly there, our interaction witnessed by Blake's extended family, who had clearly been informed of our complex situation. "Your mother's home restoration work is remarkable," I overheard Catherine telling Amanda during the party. She showed me photos of the original condition. The transformation is impressive. She's always been good at seeing potential others. "Miss?" Amanda acknowledged, a note of grudging pride in her voice that warmed me unexpectedly. By August, as I prepared for my painting workshop in New Mexico, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey of the past 4 months. What had begun as a shocking demand, "Sell your home for my wedding," had catalyzed a series of transformations I could never have anticipated. The morning of my departure, I walked through my garden in the early dawn light, saying temporary goodbyes to the plants that had been my faithful companions for decades. The Victorian stood sentinel behind me, its windows reflecting the rising sun, its future now secure as a community resource and artistic haven. My phone chimed with a text from Amanda. "Have a great time in Santa Fe. The house will still be here when you get back. So will I." The message brought unexpected tears, not of sadness, but of recognition. My daughter acknowledged both my adventure and my attachment to home. More importantly, she signaled her own presence in my future, however complicated our relationship, remained. As I locked the front door, bags packed and taxi waiting, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The house that had nearly been sacrificed to my daughter's wedding demands had instead become the catalyst for multiple transformations in our relationship, in Amanda's self-awareness, in my own willingness to venture beyond familiar comforts. The backup plan I had implemented to protect my home had accomplished something far more significant than preserving property. It had established that love without respect was insufficient, that boundaries were necessary for healthy relationships, and that sometimes the most loving choice was standing firm rather than giving way. My life at 65 was not ending, but expanding, not despite the conflict with Amanda, but partly because of it. The painful reckoning had cleared away illusions and obligations, replacing them with clarity and choice. As the taxi pulled away from my Victorian home, now protected, treasured, and destined for a purpose beyond personal inheritance, I felt not loss, but liberation. The house would remain mine for as long as I needed it, and I would remain my own person, choosing my path with confidence and clarity for all the years that stretched before me. My daughter had demanded I sell my house for her wedding. Instead, I had found a way to preserve it forever while reclaiming the most valuable asset of all, my autonomy. That was a legacy worth protecting, a lesson worth learning, and a story worth telling. Not an ending at all, but a beginning. Not a loss, but a discovery. Not a concession, but a victory. Quiet, dignified, and enduring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.